Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Wednesdays with Whitney. We're here at the studio today, and I am here with Vanessa McNeal. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you.
Thank you. Vanessa is a documentary filmmaker and a national public speaker, and she is in the studio today with us.
I am.
Very excited to have you. I actually met Vanessa on Friday, like 4 or 5 days ago, whenever Friday was. I can't keep track of the days. We met at Fem City, and Annie Woods introduced us and walked right over to me before I'd even had my coffee. Which is, if you know me, is like imperative in the morning, like I need my coffee. And she's like, "Here's Vanessa, you should meet." And I was like, okay. And then Vanessa introduced herself. So Vanessa, when you introduce yourself, like, what do you start talking about usually?
Well,
introduce yourself, Vanessa, to our crowd today.
hello. So I'm Vanessa McNeal. I am a documentary film producer and a national speaker, and also the owner of McNeal Media, which I'm super excited about.
And the first conversation we had was about a feature-length documentary that she's currently fundraising for about the sex trafficking trade in Iowa. In here, like in our cute, adorable state of Iowa, we're talking about sex trafficking. And so this was one of the first conversations I had at Fem City, and I have to say I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
I overwhelmed her.
Just a little. And usually I'm like, ready for it. And then I was like, okay, I need to take a deep breath, and then we're gonna get into this topic. And then Vanessa, really just, you have such a clear vision for how you want to talk about this,
right,
and the experiences that you've already talked to victims of sex trafficking. And a couple of the points she made to me right away is that, first of all, this is completely underground. It's not like these victims are going to be talking to people about what's happening. So when I hear about it, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't, and this actually wasn't my first time hearing about this topic. Through Junior League, I was introduced to Dorothy's House, which is a safe haven for victims of sex trafficking. Is that the appropriate way to say that? So that was one of our projects that we worked on through Junior League for the past couple of years. So I was probably more familiar than most, and I was still shocked.
Right.
So we're going to get back to that topic in just a second, but Vanessa, I really want to talk, you have such a wealth of, I don't know if I would say like a wealth of experience, but like you have a wealth of experience in the public speaking, but I was going to talk more about your history of like how you came to being interested in this topic.
Sure.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about your upbringing.
Definitely.
So you grew up primarily with your grandparents. Why was that?
So I'm a survivor of child abuse, specifically child neglect. My parents really struggled with mental health and substance abuse. I spent a little time in foster care before my grandparents decided to raise my sisters and I.
And during that time, you write a lot about, you had an experience with molestation during that.
Yep.
And one of the things that was really impactful when I was reading a lot of your literature is that you didn't even necessarily know what that was until college.
Yeah, so starting at the age of 3 or 4, I experienced childhood sexual abuse. And that happened up until the time I was in middle school.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I was the first person in my family to graduate high school.
Yeah.
And I went on to college, and I had a human sexuality class freshman year. And my professor talked about what sexual violence was, and she defined specifically what molestation was.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like I have a word for my experience. This is so powerful for me to hear. But what she did after that was change my life. She shared with the class that she was a survivor.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the first person that I had ever met that had a similar experience, because all my life I struggled thinking that I was the only one that this happened to.
Yeah.
So that was the first time in my life that I shared my story about what happened to me when I was little.
So no one had ever heard this from you before?
No.
And I think that's like when Brene Brown, are you familiar with her? She talks a lot about shame and vulnerability, and the things that we hold so close to us because we don't know that there are other people with experiences like ours. Because I think we tend to think when something bad happens to us, first of all, you were a kid, like there's no comprehending of bad or good. It's an experience.
Right.
And then as you get older, you're forced to reconcile with that and realize that it's bad and realize it's something it's not talked about, but because you realize that you don't find other people to relate to. So it's just like that spiral. You stay isolated.
And I think what changed it for me was when someone owns their truth and their story, it gives people the power to want to own theirs. And that's exactly what happened when I heard her go up there in her power and just say, I'm a survivor, and not have that shame or guilt. Yeah. And I was like, I want to be like that. So that's when I started my healing.
I think that's amazing. So tell me about that process. Like, you heard this in freshman year of college when everybody's finding their bearings, when you're like trying to figure out if you can live with a roommate. And you're like, so did you go tell somebody?
I did. So I talked to my family about it. I went and sought out therapy. And in that process of sharing my truth, I found out that my sisters were also sexually abused. So I think that it just goes to show what happens when we are actually honest and we talk about the things that we normally wouldn't talk about. Yeah. So I think it completely unfolded when I was honest about what happened to me. And
then you find that not only are like your sisters, people that are close to you in one way or another, like you have this incredible and terrible bond, but you can talk about it. Yeah. And like, I think sharing an experience, whether it's good or bad, and sometimes sharing a bad experience is one of the, I've found that when I've been really honest about something really terrible that's happened, the person that I trust to share that with becomes even more important in my life.
Absolutely.
Like when you share and you get something back from that, like I don't think there's really anything better. Like that's why we create close friendships, right? Because they're the people that catch you when you have to say something honest and awful.
I agree.
So then you also had a pretty terrible experience in college as well. Or wait, high school?
I was 15, yeah. 15. So going into my junior year of high school, I always loved school. I always wanted to be involved, and there's an opportunity for disadvantaged students to join a college prep program. And I joined that when I was 14, but when I was 15, we went on a summer trip. After you complete the summer, you can go on this really cool trip. The first night I was there, I was sexually assaulted by a boy in the program, a student in the program who I knew. So at 15, 16 years old, I experienced a lawsuit.
Oh my God.
With the college because they were negligent and not watching us and not, it wouldn't have happened if we were being monitored.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I experienced, that was the first time in my life that I experienced victim blaming and shaming, and a lawsuit is just terrible, and showing like how the legal system can work against victims, and it was just horrific.
Oh my gosh. So I think even the courage to get up to a point where you're going to say, I'm gonna have a lawsuit. Like, how did that happen?
I struggled immensely.
I can't imagine being a 15-year-old and even having to think, like, I have to protect myself legally in this manner.
Right.
Like, how does that even come into play?
I think what differentiated that abuse compared to what happened to me when I was little was the saddest part is I struggled harder with what happened to me when I was 15 because I didn't expect it to happen. Whereas when I was little, it was like, I know who these people are. I know what they're going to do to me. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder when I was 15, and my grandma saw that I was really struggling. I struggled in school. I struggled in sports. And she said, we have to do something about this. And these people can't get away with what they did. Yeah. So that's why we decided to make that decision.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, from there, you went to college.
Went to college,
First person in your family to graduate from high school, let alone college, let alone a master's degree.
Yep.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a path that hadn't been done by anybody else in your immediate family.
I tell people all the time that my story isn't rare, but my outcome is, and I could have been in a million different places other than where I'm at today. Yeah. But senior year of college, I decided that I wanted to share my story, and that's why I started documentary film work, and I found 2 filmmakers that wanted to share my story. So that's where it started.
So when you were like, I want to share my story, you weren't a filmmaker at the time.
Not at all.
And do you consider yourself a filmmaker now, or do you, like, you're like behind the camera, or are you gathering the story? Like, what's your favorite part about that? Because that's really, I mean, that's the biggest thing we're here to talk about today, is that you have made a film.
Yep.
And can you tell me, let's go back to turning it back around. What is it that you love most about the film medium in reference to what you're currently doing?
I think that I learned that I can create so much social change using documentaries. Video is huge.
Here we are on video.
Yeah, I think that documentaries are just a beautiful way to share a story.
And the honesty. I think that what I think is really amazing about documentaries is that you know that it's real. It's through a framework, of course, because anything that we present is through a framework. But the amazing hurdles that you specifically, given the topics that you tackle, have to go through to get your stories. I mean, I have to assume that that's most of the work.
Yeah.
Like, once you get, so tell me about your first documentary, because I just learned about this and was blown away.
So my first documentary was about me. So it just goes through start to finish about my story, and then I did a short film that featured the stories of 8 survivors of sexual violence, one of which was a black man, and who tell their story about their sexual violence. And that's just a topic that we can't even give men the opportunity to speak out about. So in that journey, I learned that a lot of people were interested in hearing about men. So that's when we decided to produce a documentary called The Voiceless, and that features the stories of 5 male survivors of sexual violence. And that's doing amazing right now. It's internationally recognized. It's screening at Harvard for the U.S. Army SHARP program and other places. But that's
and
kind
I
of
think
history.
That topic, my brother's watching right now, and he wants to meet you. So I'll. And something Hunter and I have talked about a lot. Hunter, for a lot of years, bounced downtown. So, he's the sober guy at the door that's making sure that things don't happen. And, we talk a lot about violence towards women and women getting taken advantage of at bars. And he's like, I can't tell you the number of times I have been grabbed at a bar.
Absolutely.
Or just my personal space has not been respected. They think because I'm a dude that I this is exciting for me. And he's like, that's just not the case. It's, I'm fine. Everything's okay. But drunk people grab me too. Right. And I think that that's not something that we can necessarily, men don't feel, they're not given the power to say when wrong's been done. Right. Especially at that level. Because we think, well, and you know what? I heard I'm going to put you in contact with somebody, a high school friend. Oh my gosh. I'll talk to you about that later. Anyway, but I think that I think what's really special about you and the projects that you've chosen to tackle is that you are really giving light to people that normally don't have voices.
Absolutely. And that's, I think I tell people all the time, I am so overwhelmed with gratitude because a lot of people spend their whole life not knowing what they're supposed to do. Yeah. And here I am at 24, knowing that my mission in this life is to give other people power, to share their stories. Yeah, and I think
that's something that you and I have in common. I share mine a little differently, and most of the people that come to me are coming in a very positive place. Right. But because I am photographing people physically, people bring a lot of their personal baggage. Like things happen to our bodies, and when something happens to our body, it starts us thinking that maybe our bodies aren't good enough or we're not good enough. And anytime that your body is not valued, that just starts that spiral. It reinforces the spiral that we might already be prone to have. Right. I want to talk about your next feature-length documentary. So what's happening now?
So I'm working on a documentary titled Grid Shock, and that will expose the sex trafficking industry in Iowa, which I know is shocking. But I'm here to tell you that every crevice of Iowa has sex trafficking happening in it. And if you're not familiar with what sex trafficking is a modern day slavery where children, babies, adolescents are being bought and sold for sex against their will. I have a story that I was given permission to share from a survivor from Iowa that she was raped 56 times in a 12-hour period while her traffickers made $60,000. So I know that it's so heavy to share, it's so heavy to hear, but it's important because there are a lot of people that don't want this story to be told.
Yeah. There's a lot of money to be made.
There's a ton of money to be made, and I want to dispel a myth that we think that sex trafficking has to include abduction or someone being missing.
Yeah.
And that's not the case.
Okay.
I want to give you a couple examples of what sex trafficking would look like. So, for instance, a lot of trafficking happens in place, which means that like a elementary student, a middle school student will go to school, they'll have their soccer practice or whatever, and they'll come home and there's like a family operation where the family members are selling their kids. They want to make rent, they want to make extra money because this is very lucrative, and you would be so surprised by how many buyers, this is high demand, how many people want children. In our communities, I was working with an ex-law enforcement officer this morning, and he talked about how just recently here in this area they were able to recover a baby that was on its way to be trafficked.
It makes me feel like very sick.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the reaction that people, when they hear these stories, probably have. I'm sure that my reaction is very common. But I think when we hear something scary and terrible, our reaction is to like live in our world.
Yeah. And I think we don't have like a vantage point of, so if we don't understand something, what happens? It just goes out.
Because I don't understand a world in which that would even
be okay.
Or like even, it's not even a concept that I don't understand it.
Right.
So when you tell me that, my first instinct is disbelief. I'm
Absolutely.
like,
It would never happen here.
Yep. That would never be in my neighborhood. That would never be the girl I just saw walking past.
Right.
And I think that that's very natural. So what do we have to do? And I think the only way to do that is to visualize the problem.
Right.
Like if we don't have, and unfortunately people need proof.
Right.
And proof sucks when it's a topic that nobody wants to talk about.
Right.
And the victims are not going to self-identify. Like what person in their right mind wants to say out loud to an audience that this happens? Like we haven't given them any power to do that. We haven't given them any space or support to do that, especially since it's not something we talk about, and it's not something we even acknowledge as a problem. So I think what you're doing is pretty amazing.
Thank you. So in this film, we plan to feature survivors, of course, law enforcement, social workers. So I think the biggest thing is education, because a lot of you might be like very similar, like this doesn't happen here, I can't believe it. And I hope that this film will be able to answer the questions that a lot of you will have. So today is day 30. I only have 30 days left to raise money for this documentary, and I'm doing it on a site called Indiegogo, which is really similar to GoFundMe, except you can give people incentives, and it's really cool. So we're giving, you can buy things like t-shirts, screen prints, tickets to the film premiere, ways to be a producer on the film. We just had a local Des Moines woman pick associate producer spot. So we have 30 days left, and we have an all or nothing campaign, meaning if we don't make all of the funds for the film, we won't be able to produce it. And we did that intentionally because we have one time to share this story, and we want to do it in the right way, and we can't do that without the adequate resources.
And filmmaking it's expensive.
So expensive.
But it is, if you think about it, what's your campaign goal?
35,000 or 10,000 in.
Okay, so we've got a ways to go. So one of the things, and I just saw a comment come up, how can we see the next film? Well, the film has to be made. So the nuts and bolts of this still has to happen. And so we're here today asking for your support. If this has resonated with you, and I can't imagine a world in which it doesn't resonate, I am going to be sharing, I already shared the link, but I will share the link again of how you can participate in this film. I'm personally going to buy some tickets because I'm going to be there anyway, so like might as well do it at the beginning. If this is something where you're like, I'm going to see it at the end, like that, see it now. Get ready, prepare to see it. I think one of the greatest things that we can do in this community is support people who are trying to do really good things.
Thanks.
So I was really excited to have you here today, and I know that we don't really dive into the tough stuff, but I think that this was one of the most valuable tough things I've come across in a while.
Thanks.
And I think we I mean, who has not watched Oprah's Golden Globe speech? Like, is there a human out there that has not seen this? And she said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly, you can help me, but she said that our voices are our most power. It's what we have, it's our power, sharing our story. And both you and I have the ability and the confidence to share our stories.
Right.
So I think it's up to us, and I think you do this beautifully, is to help the people who don't have the confidence or the power.
Right.
And like, imagine what happens when they get to share their story and they're supported and they're taken care of.
Right.
Like, isn't that the goal? That we get rid of this, or there's whistleblowing and
Yep, exactly. I think that we can, after being educated about what sex trafficking is, we all play a part in making Iowa safer. I was talking to an advocate who once, talks about making Iowa the hardest place to continue sex trafficking is because right now it's a hub.
Yeah.
And she said it's one of the most lucrative places.
Yeah.
So
it's right in the middle of the country, and it's because it's right in the middle of the country. We have so many interstates. Is this true? Like, what are some
I
of the
think
other
that plays
things?
a part. I think that people just know that they can make a lot of money doing this. It's another form of income.
Yeah.
High demand, low risk.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of people getting their doors beaten down right now. And to be honest with you, you could go on the internet right now, go on Backpage, go on Craigslist, and you could find children, you could find people, boys, girls, whoever, available to be sold for sex in our community, in Des Moines area.
Yeah.
So, and another question people might have about the campaign, I'm getting that a lot, is what happens if we don't make our goal. If we don't make $25,000 more in the next 30 days, then everyone will be refunded through our Indiegogo campaign.
Yeah.
So it's quite terrifying, but I think that we can all unite as a community and say, like, this is it. And in Oprah's words, time is up.
Yeah, the time is up.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, that was like a moment. But like, the time is up. Like, and I
is.
think that I think there's so much whistleblowing going on right now. Like, and I think that this is our time to speak up and hold our ground and do the things we need to do. And this is a big one.
Yep.
This is a big one right here in, Des Moines, because we're here, but in Iowa.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's amazing. Thank you
you.
so much for coming on.
Thanks for having
and
me.
sharing the tough stuff today. To all of you who watched, thank you so much. I'm going to provide several links to get in touch with Vanessa. And she's amazing, as you already know, but like, I can't wait to continue talking about this with you. There'll also be a blog post up later today, I believe, just sharing a little bit more of her story and how you can find out more. So, thank you.
Perfect. Yep. And if you want to go learn more information about the film, on Facebook, we're Grid Shock, not Gridlock, but Grid Shock.
Okay.
And you'll post the link, so thwill be able to find it.
they will.
But thanks for watching. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.